Hello again. I wanted to dive into the storytelling aspect of why this has been so pivotal for me, why I wrote about it in the book, and why I hope that you can really soak in the importance and value of storytelling. The reason that I have become such a fan of storytelling is because in the work that I do with clients, I realize that the more we understand our story, the past, the way it shaped up, and the more we understand that, the more we can move forward without those stories hurting us, harming us, keeping us limited in the way we think about things. Several years ago, I was hosting a retreat here in Sedona. Just a few women. One of my clients was a hypnotist who had done a lot of past life regression, and the other client was a coach. And what we realized, because we had 3 days together and we were able to go super deep into the work, we were helping one of my clients kind of go into this portal of understanding, not just in this life, but in past lives. When that happened, I asked my other client, who was a hypnotist, to help me take this client back in time. I could tell that the things that are wanting to come to the surface for clarity, for understanding, and for integration were not accessible in the conscious awareness, right? And that this needed to go backwards in time beyond this life. Never had that come up before. I didn't know how to help her in being able to hypnotize and allow her to go backwards. So I asked my client, can you help me with this? And so we together, working through her hypnotism and my understanding of these portals and the healing, we worked together to help this client go back in time. The reason I share that with you is this was like a pivotal moment in my life and also the lives of my clients, because we were able to help her see something that would not have been accessible had we not done this hypnotism. That later, or pretty soon after that retreat, inspired me to go and get certified as a past life regression hypnosis guide. And I've done over 100 of these with people all over the world. It is an incredibly healing technique. And the reason it's so healing is why I want to talk about it today. The way past life regression works is you use very light hypnosis to take people back to look at situations in the past that could be affecting them in this life. So that's why we can call it past life regression hypnotherapy, hypnosis, because we're using the past and we're using the story to help inform why things are happening the way they are. But far more important is when we go into these stories that appear magically right before our eyes as a result of the guiding that I take people through. We go into stories and they appear in the through the subconscious into the semi-conscious awareness of the individual, and I'm guiding them through questions. Just like a movie was appearing on a screen before you, things start to show themselves through the questions that I'm asking. Over time, over asking these questions over 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, a story starts to appear of who this person was that we were in the past, what was happening for us. And when we notice these stories, one that comes to mind is a man who, when we began the journey of going into his past life, he woke up and he was in a barn and he was sleeping. This was his home. He realized that he was sleeping on hay every night. The more questions I asked, the more the story unfolded, where we figured out that in this particular story, he went back in time and realized that he witnessed his family being killed in a very tragic fire. And I think that the time was like in the early 1800s in the United States. He recognized the things he was wearing, the language that was being spoken, that he was a man. And in this life, I think the person was actually a woman. So this will happen sometimes, right? We're different genders and different lives. And so we drop into the story. And the key characteristics was that after his parents were killed in this tragic fire, and he was pretty young, 10, 11, 12 years old, he went out to take care of himself. There was no net, there was no safety net back then, right? Especially. So he became a migrant person who traveled from place to place finding work to do. And when he started the story that we dropped into, he had been working for this family and he was living in their barn and he was doing work on their property and farming and different things. Well, when we started noticing and being placed into different scenes in this life, he realized that this woman, the woman of the home, was someone who felt like a mother figure to him, but he was also attracted to her for different reasons. And at some point, he came up with an idea that if he had money, he would be able to lure her away and she would become his wife. So I think he was in his early 20s at this point when he woke up in the barn. And he decided if he had money, then she would fall in love with him and everything would be fine. And at some point, he stole money in the home of this family that had been very kind to him. And when they found out that he had stolen this money, they found the money in the barn. They actually hung him. And it was very tragic. And he witnessed his death as a result of this whole experience. But by going through this process, he was able to see how it was really this child. I actually now think that he was more like 8 years old. This child, when he watched his family die, was the one who had been making the decisions that were not good for him. And they were affecting how he thought about what could happen with this woman. And the stealing of the money was really his only chance of like restoring home. Oh, it makes me emotional. It's like that was the only way he thought he could get back what he had lost in his youth. We were able to go in and heal through the witnessing of this story of him noticing the loss and the grief and not having family. We helped him heal these wounds that had been plaguing him in that life. But also, what's amazing is in the current life, this sense of never being good enough and always needing more money to be successful. And then, yeah, never having the money. Or if he got the money, then he would be killed as a result. It felt like stealing money from other people. And as you can see, it's like we move back and forth when we're trying to understand how these stories can heal us. But by healing the wounds in this past life, when he came out or when she came out of the past life regression, she could see how this pattern had been playing out in her life. And yet, because we had healed it, because we had brought this integration of wholeness back into his life, she was able to look at her life in a completely different way from this place of deep healing and appreciation. That while things might feel uncomfortable when she asked people to give her money or when she was trying to earn money, it wasn't true. It was just this feeling that had been placed beyond this life. And yet it was playing out over and over again in this life, even though she had no conscious awareness of how that was affecting her. Now, the reason I share this with you is because when we go into our own stories in this lifetime and we look back in the past and we see the trauma and we see the wounds and we honor them and we accept that they happened and that there is probably a different story that we could be telling ourselves, and we feel it emotionally to the core of our being, we are engaged in healing in this lifetime. Now, some of you might be curious and you want to look more into past life regression. I'm happy to talk to you about that more. Ask me about it in a question and answer session, right? In a coaching session. But any which way, whether you're looking in the past in this life or using tools to go into past lives because you're interested in that, and not everybody will be, and that's totally fine. It allowed me to see the healing ability that we have as human beings when we emotionally go into a story, heal it, forgive it, allow ourselves to not live in shame with those stories anymore. We become almost like a new person in our lives. We approach things differently. We see with a more open and aware and loving perspective to our life, to our money, to our situations. it is incredibly powerful. This is why I'm encouraging you to do this work. This is why I want you to lean into these questions about your story and do what you can. Dive in as deep as you possibly can, because there is healing waiting for you. It's part of the reason I like writing so much and journaling so much, and why I talk about it, here, and encourage you to do that. So I hope that's helpful to you. I just really wanted to bring deeper meaning into these discussions and encourage you to keep going. Thank you so much. Namaste.